In at number 10, we have the Megatheum. But what makes this such a great creature for SOTF is on the surface, it maybe doesn't seem like a creature which you'd go for. Surely would you just go for one of the bosses and they would just be the best ones? By the way, we are excluding bosses in this list because it kind of makes sense that they are really OP and great for SOTF. It just really depends on your playing style, and I don't really go for those. But if you do want the bosses are a great option, of course, pretty self-explanatory. But why is this Megatheum so good? Well, the first point that I have to mention is it's so abundant across the map. Like, you can find these things just like everywhere, especially in the redwoods, which the ring always seems to want to go to. So you'll probably, in like every match, end up in the redwoods somewhere, and they're just everywhere. Like, you can just find a Megatheum so easily. Don't jinx it, obviously, the art curse of looking for a creature if you actually want to look for one. But yeah, very easy to find, and they do definitely pack a punch. If you get one up to that tier 3 level, you really are going to have yourself a good time. And I'm pretty sure they're not that expensive in terms of the dino tokens to actually tame. So it really is not a bad option, especially in a pinch, or if you really just need a creature to get started and get some other creatures in your army to roster up something to win the game. Next up, we've got the UT. But what makes the UT such a great creature for SOTF? And obviously it can buff all of those creatures with its roars, which is nice if you have a kind of bigger army with Rexes and all of that. And that is going to be extremely useful. But they also are pretty inexpensive, I'm pretty sure, in terms of dino tokens. And they do definitely pack a punch in terms of damage. Again, if you get a tier 3 one, you really do have a good time. And with those roars, again, you can buff other creatures which you may have even more, which is definitely what you want in SOTF, especially if someone tames the dragon, which often does get tamed in matches. Actually, pretty much every match I've played, the dragon has been tamed at some point. And although it does have a pretty harsh fire attack against, obviously, dinosaurs like carnivores, herbivores maybe not so much, where a Thler could definitely come in good handy. But still, if you buff those creatures up, especially if you have a UT to back it, obviously that's how you buff your creatures on the island. Obviously there's no other options, and there pretty much aren't just any options across any other map. Then you're going to have yourself a much easier time at taking down a creature like the dragon. Although still very difficult, but very doable, and I've at least done it a couple of times, which kind of proves my point, really. Next up, we have the Bionics. But what would be so good for the Bionics in SOTF? Well, the main thing is agility for this creature, which really is a great component for SOTF. And there is another creature later on which has better agility than this creature, but still its agility is definitely well warranted, especially in water. Although, albeit most of SOTF combat is not in water whatsoever, so I'm not really going to talk about that as a subject, because you're not really going to be doing underwater battles, especially considering how quickly that ring comes in at the start of the game. Like, pretty much all of the water in the game is just cut off right in those early stages. The Bionics is also very cheap in terms of dino tokens, taking pretty much nothing. I'm not actually sure on the exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure it's easily less than 400, which isn't actually that bad. Trust me, 400 sounds like a lot if you haven't played SOTF. If you have, you know, it really just isn't that bad at all. And again, spin ability in water, kind of nice. If the ring ends up being around the swamp biome, that could kind of be to your benefit. If you can just about swim, do the spin attack, maybe. But maybe that's not really a good strat, actually. The main thing is the mobility. Its health is pretty good, and its damage is quite high, which definitely does benefit you with a creature like this in SOTF, because then you can get away from danger pretty quick. In at number 7, we've got the Thler, and it has to be on the list because killing dragons is so easy with the Thler compared to any other creature, which really does pack a punch. The Megatheum, great shout as well, but the Thler is significantly better at doing the job than the Megatheum because it deals significantly more damage, and you could say somehow slightly more abundant as well. Theories are just everywhere, no matter what side of the arc map you're on, or really what biome, apart from the ice biome. I don't really think they spawn there. Maybe they do, but not in abundance. Pretty much everywhere, apart from the ice biome and maybe the swamp biome, they spawn. And you can just find them really easily. Yes, they do have 700 health in terms of their base health, but honestly, that is the same as a Spino, and when you're getting a creature like this, it's insane that it's actually that low, especially considering how great of a dragon killer they are, because that fire ability which they do barely does any damage to you, since you're a herbivore and not a carnivore, and it really, really does play to your advantage. And I hope that if you use a Thera, then you can very easily kill a dragon, and if you don't, maybe check that your Thera is at least a tier 3, because obviously tier 3 is kind of a base. It's the highest level, obviously, that you can get to, but tier 3 at least if you're trying to face a dragon, because it's not going to be worth facing it otherwise, really, because your chances aren't that high. Tier 3 Thera, though, perfect. Next up, we've got the Thler, and the reason why this creature is here is because of that mobility. The Thler is one of the most mobile creatures in Ark. Sadly, obviously, with SOTF now being on ASA, which is why I'm making this video, because SOTF is now on ASA. Either way, the reason why this is slightly worse now, you could say, is the terrain. It just isn't designed properly around these creatures. It is so complex in areas and just so glitchy and buggy that Thlers can't traverse it. But most of the time, you are having a good time, and it is slightly better than what it was when I was recording this B-roll here. So, you know, it is a little bit better now. Not a whole lot better, but a little bit. Just a little bit. I find I get stuck a little bit less, especially in SOTF, as I'm usually not going over harsh terrain like mountains. Sometimes, especially, I don't know why, it always seems like I end up in the redwoods. Like, at the end, the ring always just closes in on the redwoods. Pretty much every game has ended in the redwoods. I don't know if every game's like that. I'm pretty sure it isn't. It must not be, because then it would be so predictable. But I often do find myself with this mountain here, which you're seeing in the B-roll. Obviously, I never get to the top of it, because I don't need to. I just, like, skirt around the sides, and it isn't too bad at doing that. But you can see up here, it gets pretty lethal in some stretches, where it's just like, how do I even climb up that? Which is an issue with creatures with great mobility, like the Thler. But again, also this creature does have the bleed ability, so it definitely does pack a punch. That mobility, again, if you get one up to tier 3, you can very easily take out players on foot, as long as you yourself are well armoured, because a player with a rocket launcher could very easily take you out just like that, and, you know, you probably don't want that to happen to you. But still, if you keep your eye out and you're well armoured and you've got tier 3 Thler, it could be a pretty easy way to winning the game. In at number 5, we have the Caro, and the main reason for this, it's got 400 health points, and it barely takes any dino tokens. I think it's in the 30s or 40s. It might be like 31, 32 actually. Pretty sure it's either 31 or 32 dino tokens. Boom, like that. Tamed. Instant. Like, so easy. And again, once you've got this thing up to tier 3, they definitely do pack a punch. With that second attack dealing a bleed ability, it really is a great creature to have. Especially because they spawn absolutely everywhere. Apart from the snow biome. And yeah. Even in the swamp, though, and the redwoods, you will get Caros. And in just general, just all the rest of the map, you could say. Just whatever that biome is, apart from the ocean, of course. The ice and no, they do spawn in the swamp. You can find Caros, and they're everywhere. And they deal bleed damage, and they're pretty quick. They're pretty agile. They're pretty mobile. Obviously, not as much as the Thler, but I just love Caros. And in ASA, they've been really good. I've won quite a few games with Caros. Literally just one Caro, but that was only once. I have won a couple of other games though, but with multiple Caros. And if you have multiple, you really can deal a hell of a lot of damage. Although they don't have any kind of pack buff, they still really do well because of that bleed ability, and it's just a huge benefit to have, really. Next up, we've got the Giga, and this had to be on the list. Like, it is a Giga. It's an insane creature for dealing damage. It has to be on the list. Like, it's insane. Honestly, the Giga is like one of the best combat dealers. But why didn't I put the Crocodontosaurus? I really haven't seen much of it in ASA. I know it is there. You can technically say I'm putting the Giga and the Crocodontosaurus together, but the Giga is seemingly more common on the island. Like, the Crocodontosaurus is somehow even rarer than the Giga, which is a little bit insane, but it kind of seems how it is. And the Giga is just, come on. You call this thing Tiny Tim. I know you can't name creatures on ASA. At least I'm pretty sure you can't. You used to be able to back in like really old ASA before it got updated last December. Not obviously last December, last December. December of 2022. And then obviously the ASA one came out last year, December 2023, and now we're in January. Either way, to do with all of the ASA which I played, don't know what that previous sentence was there, I've just seen a lot more Gigas than Crocodontosaurus, and I've used a lot more Gigas than Crocodontosaurus. The taming methods, again, for every creature on SOTF is the same, so you don't have to worry about that. And they just are really useful, especially if you get one up to tier 3. Absolutely insane beast with dealing damage. In at number 3, we have the Spino, and this creature is extremely mobile and also deals a heck of a lot of damage, which is extremely useful for obviously doing any kind of SOTF thing. You've got the mobility and you've got the damage. The only thing lacking is sometimes the health can be not that great, but considering it's only 700, they only got 700 health. I don't know, I was talking about the Thea earlier, I was talking like 700 dino tokens or something stupid like that. No, 700 health. If I made a mistake there, sorry about that. Either way, 700 health, and I think to tame they're about 70 odd dino tokens, or they might be in the 60s. 70, 60 odd. Actually, it is probably more to be in the 60s. Either way, that kind of, it will tell you once you knock it out, and then you hold R to do that. Either way, pretty inexpensive carnivore, all things considered. Like a Diplo is almost as expensive as a Rex or something stupid like that. Either way, also great in the water, which is kind of nice. Again, most SOTF stuff is not going to be in the water, so not a huge ability, which is nice and very useful, but its hydration buff will be, as you know, you might be touching water at some point, especially if the ring ends up in the swamp biome. You're going to be at a huge advantage there with that hydration buff, meaning that you can do even more damage, and they can turn 360 on the spot, which is nice. And they definitely do travel significantly faster than most other carnivores on the game, which really does hugely benefit these creatures. And great shout on ASA SOTF. If I've said ASA at any point in this video, sorry, you kind of know what I mean. Also, they spawn in the ice biome as well, which is kind of nice, because a lot of other creatures on this list just really don't. In at number 2, we've got the Rex, another creature which actually does spawn in the ice biome, believe it or not, or kind of on the outskirts of it. You can find them in the ice biome. I'm pretty confident with it. And the Rex had to be on this list, and the reason why it's higher than the Spino on the list is because of that additional health. And it is hugely necessary in SOTF, because your health is going to tank so much when you're facing loads and loads of really buff, powerful creatures. And yes, damage is extremely important as well, and they definitely do have a hefty amount of that, but health is equally, if not more important in SOTF than it even is in just normal Arc, because you don't have to face bosses, or you kind of do if someone's tamed one of them, but you don't need damage for the bosses as per se, and you don't need to just do as much damage as quickly as possible. You need to do a very decent amount of damage, but also with a very good health pool to tank everything back. I know it's kind of similar, and it seems a little bit irrational that I'm saying this, but health is definitely more important in SOTF than it is just generally in Arc, because you're facing more buff creatures, and you also just might be facing waves and waves of people right all at once. And if you just leveled up into melee, I know you can't level your stats, so that's irrelevant, but if you just like melees, just all of it, just had a really powerful melee creature with like no health, you would barely survive. Like, you would just be killed so quickly, whereas with a creature like a Rex, you can definitely pick up a fight. And in at number 1, we have the Aloe, and most people that know this channel and that watch me a lot know that I don't really like the Aloe just at all in normal Arc, but in SOTF I found it to be extremely useful, as it is very mobile. It has the pack buff, which is great if you're taming at least 3 of them, which I usually do, especially considering they come in packs as well. You can just get 3 of them just like that, boom, and then get all of them up to tier 3, and you've got yourself a hunking beast worth of damage. And they've got pretty decent health as well, especially if you've got 3 of them. You can deal that damage even quicker. Again, with things like Rexes and Spinos and all that, you can have multiple, but you don't get that pack buff, which is a really huge advantage. And again, the mobility is heavily warranted in SOTF, as mobility is also a really important thing. You can quickly get out of danger like that, and their stamina drain is not that bad as well, which the Giga really can't hold up to, because the Giga stamina is awful, and the Rex kind of as well, but you know, the Rex has the benefit of more health and generally being a bit bigger and beefier, as someone is probably a lot more likely to go for you if you have an Aloe than a Rex, because you know, they're just like, oh, I can easily pick on that person. But if you have a pack of 3, you can very easily surprise someone and quickly just kill them off like that. Boom. Done. And yeah, you can have a really good time with these creatures, and they definitely are one of the best, if not the best, SOTF creature, in my opinion, to use. They just SOTF built really. They've got the mobility, they've got the damage, they've got the pack buff, they've got the health, they've got the stamina. It's amazing, obviously, excluding bosses. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I hope that you enjoyed this one. And also, what are your thoughts on the new SOTF? Pretty much the same as the other one, but in Unreal Engine 5. And also, what's your favourite SOTF creature? And I'll see you all later.